What's up, everybody? Hey, I know as sound designers, audio creators, musicians, composers, that we like to just get to the meat of stuff. We like to hear stuff. We like to see stuff. We don't like to get too in the weeds with programming, but I want to talk to you today about something that is easily overlooked but can save you a ton of time, a ton of headaches, and a ton of frustration, and that is the simple feature called debug. That's right, don't sleep on debugging. We get this perspective of what debugging is, and we think it's some super complicated technical term, which, you know, if you're deep into C++ code, it could get pretty intense. But for the Unreal Engine, what we're talking about is a simple interface way of getting instant feedback to whether or not your script or your blueprint or your MetaSound is working properly. So we're going to dig into that right now. When we're working with sounds, when we're working with audio, sometimes it's really difficult to tell whether or not what we're trying to get to happen is happening. Maybe it's because there's a bunch of sounds that are really similar and we're not sure which ones are playing, or we're not sure if we're even listening to the right thing because we've got so many of these sounds floating around in our ears and in our project. So what debugging does, it allows us to see a visual script, a visual interaction, a visual feedback, if you will, for what exactly is happening at that instant. And it can save you a ton of time, especially when it comes to looping, triggering, when trigger boxes are doing certain things, what sounds are playing. So let's look at that right now. In my last video, I talked about how to create an AI melody in the Unreal Engine. So we're going to use that project. This is my AI melody project. And what we have here basically is, you know, we have this player that triggers a pad, and then when you walk up, if you remember from the last video, if you haven't seen that, you can go check that out. When you walk up on this platform, you hear a melody start. Play a melody here. So when you're on this platform, it's playing this melody that's being generated by the AI over top of my pads. And so then I'm gonna jump off this box, and that's gonna stop the sound. Typically that's pretty cool, and that's kind of easy to tell, but it's nice to know, like, as soon as I go into that trigger box, is that melody playing or not, or is it the wrong melody, or whatever. So what I want to do is I want to show you just a couple ways to debug your MetaSound. So the first way is we're gonna go inside the MetaSound. So here's the MetaSound we created in our last video. It's got a pad layer, and it's got the AI generated melody that's using a sine wave and some effects to generate that melody. Now, what's happening here is when the game starts, this layer is being triggered, but this layer is not. This layer is waiting for the trigger box. So as you can see, we've created an input here to start the melody on this trigger box, and then we've created it to stop on this trigger box. Where debugging comes in handy is, what if we could immediately tell ourselves whether this melody was playing or not, and we didn't have to wait to listen to it generate? And that's what debugging does. So we're going to look at a debug feature real quick. All right, so we're going to go to this play AI melody, and so if you remember, when I trigger this, we'll hear the melody come in. Melody slowly coming in, it's being generated, and then this one stops the melody. And it's different every time. So let's go here, and what I want to do is I want to debug this. I want to know instantly if this is playing or not. So we're going to pull off this node here, and we're going to look under functions, debug, and then we have a few options here. What we're going to do here is we're going to print log float. What this is going to do is this is going to print to our output log, and we're going to dock this so we can see it. It's going to print to our output log whatever we type here, or whatever value we put here. So right, I'm just going to type here, is playing melody. So as soon as this is triggered, this print log will tell us whether or not this melody is playing. So let's check that out right now. All right, MetaSound started. We're going to click on this input, and boom, right over here, is playing melody. So we know that that works. So that's how we can check it in the MetaSound. Now let's also go over here. Let's add another one here. We're going to copy this, and we're going to put this here, and we're going to do this on the stop melody trigger. And then what we're going to do here is not playing, or you know what, let's call this stopped melody. Stopped melody. Okay, so now when we start over, we're going to trigger this one. It's going to give us this debug. Yes, our melody is playing. And then we're going to go here, and we're going to click on the stop melody. Boom. our melody has been stopped. Even though you heard a fade out, we knew that our melody has been stopped. So you can see how this is really useful in programming. You don't have to wait and hear the melody generate. You know instantly that it's going to be generating. Now, let's look at this. In our last video, I was kind of trying to figure out how long these times were, whether it was milliseconds and seconds. I found out it was actual seconds. And so let's say, for instance, so when we stop this melody, we are triggering this release envelope that's turning down this volume so that we have a fade out, a nice smooth fade out. And what we want to do here is, let's say I want to know how fast that's fading out, what values that's generating. So we could go over here to our output envelope, and we could also do a print log here. We could print a float here, okay? And then we want, on our release, we want to trigger this float. So what this is going to do, this is going to print the level that this is at when this release is triggered. So let's play. Let's open our output log. It's kind of annoying, but it is what it is. We're going to start the melody. Okay. We're going to stop the melody, and it's going to tell us right over here where our volume was at when we stopped it, which is super cool. Let's say we want to read what level of gain this output envelope filter is at over the time period that it's closing. So when we trigger this release, it slowly turns down the gain. But let's just say we want to see if that's working properly. So we're going to pull out here on this level, we're going to pull out of the output envelope float. We're going to do a compare. We're going to compare this float to 0. So when this output envelope filter hits 0, we are going to say that that's true. And then what we're going to do is nothing, because we're just going to keep that. As long as that's true, we're not going to do anything. Now, if it's false, what we're going to do is we're going to trigger a delay of, let's say, 0.2 milliseconds. And then out of that, we're going to print log. We're going to print this float, and the value that we want to print is the level of the envelope. So in essence, what we're doing here, as long as this envelope is not 0, okay, meaning it's over 0, which it's going to be over 0 until it's completely closed, it is going to print the actual level that it's at. Now all I got to do is, on release trigger, I want to trigger a repeat. And what this is going to do is, this is going to, every time it repeats, it's going to compare it. It's going to compare where we're at to 0. And as long as it's not at 0, it's going to print where we're at. And we're going to put this at 0.1 seconds, so basically every 1/10 of a second. Now, let's watch this work. So we're going to play our sound. We're going to open the output log. We're going to dock it so we can see it. We're going to start this melody, which would be triggered by a trigger box. Then we're going to stop this melody. And as we stop it, we're going to get a list of numbers. Boom. So here you go. Now let's stop the MetaSound. What we saw is that this envelope generator went gradually down in volume over the course of a second until it hit 0. Then when it hit 0, it turned off the print log. That's what this is. This is kind of like a gate. So as soon as it hit 0, it turned off. So that's another great way to just kind of be able to see what your MetaSound is doing, what numbers it's generating, and all that stuff. It doesn't actually affect the playback. It just tells you what it's actually doing. Let's look in our blueprint here. We have in this level, when you walk up on this ramp, when we walk up on this ramp, it starts the melody. Now I can hear that, but what if it was more subtle? Or what if maybe the melody, the first 30 seconds of the melody was silent for some reason? Well, then you'd have to wait 30 seconds to tell. Or what you could do is you could go into this blueprint. And so here we're set up. In the first trigger volume, it starts the MetaSound, play AI melody, which is this part right here. So it triggers this. and then on the exit, it triggers the stop AI melody, which is here. Now, what if we just want to know on the screen if that's working? All we have to do is on the overlap, we can come out here, we can do a print string, and we'll just say we want it to print melody is playing. Okay? Then on this one, when the player leaves the overlap, we want it to print melody is stopped. Now, when we go over here, we'll see in our game that when we trigger this, we're going to see over here on the left-hand corner, there it is. Melody is playing. And you actually saw that before you even heard it because it's instant. That's the beauty of the debug. So now let's jump off and you can see melody is stopped. Now, what's great about that is it's instant feedback. Instant feedback. So if your sounds are doing ambient things that take a long time, you don't have to wait. Melody is playing and melody is stopped. So that is a great way. That's the concept of debugging. It's really just visual feedback on things that normally might take time to figure out. Maybe can't tell which gun is shooting, and this is a good way to give visual feedback to that. So I hope that helped. I hope you don't sleep on debugging, because let me tell you, it's already saved me tons of time in my blueprinting and in my scripting for MetaSounds, figuring out whether something is working right or not before I have to spend a bunch of time listening and trying to figure out stuff. So I hope you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more stuff on MetaSounds coming in the future, and we'll see you soon.